We were talking a moment ago about we've come a long way since the days that TFN used to throw parties at La Zona Rosa. But while we threw great parties, we often kind of lost out on this opportunity to really remind us of how important this is. You know, Bill Nye has been an advocate for science education for over 20 years. And it is just an honor, Mr. Nye, that you've chosen to accept our Stand Up for Science Award for 2013, and we're thrilled you're here, sir. He's a scientist, an engineer, comedian, author, and inventor, and we also learned this year, not a half-bad dancer. But even science couldn't overcome medicine at that point. But more than anything, Bill Nye is a man with a mission to foster a scientifically literate society. And he helps people everywhere not just understand concepts, but to appreciate it, as we just saw. After graduating from Cornell, Mr. Nye moved to Seattle to work as a mechanical engineer for Boeing. It didn't keep his attention. He soon quit his day job, and he took on an opportunity to be a comedian and a writer and a performer. He's most famous, obviously, for Bill Nye the Science Guy, his own television show that won 18 Emmy Awards within 5 years. If there is a science to TV programming, he figured that out. Bill Nye currently serves as the executive director for the Planetary Society, the world's largest space interest organization. But on one hand, while he does the education part of it, education shouldn't be controversial. He made the headlines in 2012 when he was, as you saw just a bit there, stepped into the arena and took on those who are evolution deniers. And for that, we want to thank him. I want to just give you an opportunity to hear one more time some of his words.
Bill Nye the Science Guy. Bill Nye the Science Guy. Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Science rules.
Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Inertia is a property of matter.
Bill Nye the Science Guy.
T minus 7 seconds.
Bill Nye the Science
Wow, thank you all very much. This really is, it's really an honor to address you, and I also just want to say congratulations. People on the outside always wonder what's going on. I mean, here. In the day, 20 years ago, when we were doing the Science Guy show, we reviewed the Texas science standards because they're so influential. They're so important to not just the state of Texas. Sorry, I don't mean to use the expression just the state of Texas. Sorry, the great state of Texas, yes. But they're important because they influence so many other states that just that use them and use the textbook. So congratulations again, and as a citizen and taxpayer, thank you. Thank you very much for getting the textbook business taken care of. I really appreciate it. Now, for those of you who don't know, I go pretty far back with Texas also. I don't want you to be jealous, but I used to work in the oil field in Big Spring, in Snyder, in Victoria, Refugio. For those of you who don't know, Victoria and Refugio are one of the half dozen or so towns that claim that Nolan Ryan was born there. I don't know how many exactly claim, but those are the ones I visited. And I also gratified to see so many guys wearing bow ties tonight. It's really nice. I didn't set out to have the bow tie thing be so important, but of course I'm delighted that it did. I was a junior in high school, and by long tradition, the boys wait on the girls at the girls' athletic banquet. This is right on. This is where, and they're not, at that point, at least when I was in school, it's not called a women's athletic banquet, but at that time, you can't really, there's no distinguishing. I mean, it's bring it on. So I said, if we're going to be waiters, let's dress up. Let's, look cool, or try to. And so I said, let's wear bow ties. So after that, we started wearing bow ties, and I found that they don't flop into your flask. They don't slip into your soup. They're of great practical value. And I learned from my father, who taught me how to tie a bow tie, tying it around my leg repeatedly. And he told me a story that was presented to me as a true story. Now, if nothing else, the most important thing in science education is the process, the making an observation, evaluating it, coming up with a hypothesis, and then an experiment and so on, and compare your results with your hypothesis. But the most important thing, really, is critical thinking, the ability to assess the validity of claims, like the Earth, for example, is 10,000 years old, something like that. So this was presented to me as a true story. My grandfather was in the Rotary, and they had a convention. And even in those days, at the turn of the last century, they rented tuxedos. And the tuxedo came with a tie, a bow tie. So my grandfather didn't know how to tie the tie, so he just took a chance. He went to the hotel room next door. Excuse me, can you help me tie my tie? And the guy said, yeah, lie down on the bed. So my grandfather is said to have lain on the bed, and the guy tied a perfect bow tie knot. And then, as I think quite reasonably at this point in the story, my grandfather said to have said, thank you, why'd I have to lie down on the bed? I'm an undertaker. It's the only way I know how to do it. I mean, maybe. It's pretty good, though, right? So. So for me, our story begins in my front yard in Washington, D.C., and this would include a picture of the moon. Yeah, I'm supposed to have a clicker. Oh, I do. Wait, yes. Steady. It's electric. Be careful. So we don't really do that. My father had a telescope which had belonged to his scoutmaster. It smelled old, but you could see the moon perfectly. And one of the first things that strikes you about the moon when you're a kid is, first of all, it's so crazy round. It's so perfectly round. It looks smooth, and if someone suggested to you that it was made of cheese, you'd say, well, yeah, I guess so. It could very well be made of cheese. But then when you look closely, and I found out later, I was looking at the Eratosthenes crater, named after a guy who computed the circumference of the Earth to within 4% using sticks. You see that the moon is astonishingly rough and littered with craters. And so those discoveries were made just in the last 400 years when when Galileo took military telescope and aimed it, instead of at the bad guys, at the sky, which apparently no one had thought to do in all that time. Well, it's really quite a remarkable thing, because what else have we not thought to do? What else hasn't occurred to us? What does the future hold? What's right under our noses that we haven't even come to appreciate? And future generations will laugh at us. Ha, 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 ha. They didn't even know what darkons were. That's my idea. They're particles of dark. Dark energy and dark matter and everything else in physics is particles. So why not darkons, is my feeling. Are there any physics people here? So you hire these guys, these people, to predict the outcome of the horse race. Have you been down this road? So you embellish the joke any way you want, but the physicist goes away for a year doing this extraordinary analysis on horse races so he can tell, let's say, for example, the mafia, how they can more reliably predict the outcome of horse races without resorting to exotic drugs and homicides and stuff. And so the physicist comes up to the front of the room and he says, first, we assume a horse is a sphere. And in physics, that's so funny. I'm sorry. Sorry, the rest of you. Now, you know, I spend a lot of time with the skeptics. I'm a big skeptic about critical thinking skills and evaluating evidence. And I had an extraordinary professor, Carl Sagan, who emphasized, Carl Sagan, yes. You guys, I was just in the back of the room. I was just an unremarkable student, but he was pretty compelling. But his big thing was extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. And it changed my life. You know, so in the skeptics community right now, everybody is very aware of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual community because they're so because it is so well organized. And if it's just what is it about people that want to limit the rights of LGBT individuals? What is it about that? I mean, we're in Texas where we listen to a lot of country music. It's going to be about 20 years ago, I Don't Even Know Your Name, in which the protagonist of the song gets so drunk he marries the waitress. And he wakes up married to the waitress, and her distinctive quality, she doesn't have a front tooth. But to me, how drunk would you have to be? I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that, as the saying goes, but man, I would have to be really drunk to wake up married to a gay guy. It would just really surprise me. What do you care? Just lead your life. To those of us on the outside, it's just extraordinary. And then in the irony is Matthew 5:39, which is also in Luke 6:30, where they encourage you, as translated into English, I don't know how many times, I don't know what the original language was, there are probably experts here, might have been Sanskrit, and then became Hebrew, and then it became what people might call Yiddish, and then or German, or Low German, and then it became English. But you're supposed to turn the other cheek if somebody slaps you. And that's okay, but I sense everybody's frustration. So can I advance this? What happens? Will my head explode? Yeah, so I was on CBS, this is several years ago now, and I apologize about the low quality of the image capture, but it was from 3/4 videotape, pneumatic tape back in the day. We had to push buttons and the tape rewound, and we liked it. But I was there with Jerry Falwell, and it was a hilarious premise for an Easter broadcast. It was. And they asked me in, and I really didn't know what the deal was at first. This is when I was new to the whole thing. And the question was, which came first, the chicken or the egg? And I don't want to mess you up, but it's a science, at some level, it's a science question. I mean, philosophically, it's a question, and you can't really know, and isn't this a wonderful irony and paradox and full of joy? But from a scientific standpoint, the egg had to come first, because whatever was before the proto-chickens, the not quite chickens, that interacted. Can we say interacted in television? They interacted and produced an egg. Is that is that word? Do we have? Is that okay? Yeah. To the young people, they hooked up. All right, and they produced an egg. That egg is inherently different from the pre-chickens. I mean, that's it. That's it. We're done. And so I remarked that obviously, clearly, Reverend Falwell is ignorant in this matter, and the newscasters just came unglued, tailspun. You don't mean he's ignorant. Well, how do you describe it? He doesn't know about it. So I got to say, I was a little afraid this might happen. I feel like kind of preaching to the choir. But our problem is, at some level, we have to convince people that what's really going on in the universe, what's really exciting, is so much more, fills me with so much more reverence, so much more appreciation for what I like to call our place in the cosmos or our place in space. At some point, we have to let that passion come through and sway some taxpayers and voters. I mean, there's a fairness issue, and there are the facts, but there's also the passion. So, as you may know, I had big fun in Waco several years ago, where I pointed out in the beginning of Genesis, I guess that's sort of a redundant, in the beginning of the beginning was this passage where it's as translated into English, I don't know how many times from ancient language, it asserts that God made the sun to light the day and the moon to light the night. Well, I just pointed out that whoever wrote that passage or whoever translated it in English, something's been lost. First of all, the moon is up all day. Okay? It's not hidden. They don't hide it. It's like it's right there. During the day, it's white. You may have noticed it. Okay, that's first of all. Then the moon doesn't glow. I mean, I looked at it through a telescope. I saw the shadows. People have walked on the moon. They took pictures. It's not glowing. Like, get over it. So to assert that passage is a reason to disregard everything we can observe in nature and the universe it's hard to respect, I admit. But eventually we're going to have to reach these people. And so you may be happy to know that in February, I am going to the Creationist Museum in Kentucky to interact with my colleague Ken Ham. Ken Ham will be there, and I'm sure he'll have some insights. Sorry that I'm getting a heckler, but it sounded funny. Table 6, what's your heckle? Don't wake up married to Ken Ham. That's good advice. That's good advice. It would be a surprising result, as we say in science education. People call it a discrepant event. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it would be a surprising result. Sorry. This woman took her kids literally by the wrists, I could see her in the shadows, and dragged her kids out of my talk at McLennan Community College because she has said that we believe in God, and therefore, we believe the moon glows on its own and you can't see it in the daytime. What? And so it is, I understand, it is a tough thing. So I think the problem is just basically that I've failed as a science educator. And I'll give you an example. My sister lives in Danville, Virginia, and if you know it, the Dan River, and some people may remember Dan River Fabrics, now a defunct company, but it was on the Dan River. And Dan River for a while is the border between North Carolina and Virginia. It's my nephew, my own flesh and blood, talks with such an Appalachian accent. Sometimes I just, what did you say? It's really rural, is what I'm driving at, or it used to be. It used to be. Anyway, in front of this church just a few months ago was this, and I took it with my phone. It's not the best camera, but it says, Big Bang Theory, God, you must be kidding. You must be kidding, God. And so it's that the preacher, or the person who in charge of the marquee, couldn't get his or her mind around it, therefore it couldn't be true. And that's where I failed as an educator. I can't blame me for all of it, but I think most of it, really. That the process by which Edwin Hubble discovered that the universe is expanding is really extraordinary. I mean, the diligence that this guy, he spent night after night. If you've ever been to Mount Wilson in California, it's even on a summer night, it is cold. Guy was up there on this old-style, enormous telescope looking through this little eyepiece that was the state of the art, directing the light to spectrometers and radiometers, wearing mittens with the fingertips cut off, and he discovered that the universe is expanding. And yet this is so troubling that for this preacher at this church, he was willing, or she was willing to deny the whole thing. It's really amazing. And so what we have to do is reach everybody with what I like to call the PB&J, the passion, beauty, and joy of the real story. Now, I was going to show this one frame, but you guys, I appreciate you took another level. I took this snapshot from my hotel room right before I came downstairs. So this thing, you guys understand the reason I'm talking so slowly in that video is because I'd been up all night. I mean, it was a 7:30 in the morning in New York, and what time is that in the Pacific? That's 3:30, you subtract 3, it's 4:30. So I'd gotten up at 3:30 in the morning, I was talking about, but I am very gratified that this thing has taken off. I was just making observations that my colleagues and I in the space community have made for many years, that evolution is a fact. Isn't it fantastic? We are part of nature, we fit in here. As they say, spoiler alert, we all die. No, really. Do you guys know Stephen Wright, the comedian? Yeah, I want to live forever. So far, so good. Yeah. But that we fit in, that we are part of this extraordinary process, that we are made of the same stuff as stars is really something. So that this video has received almost 6 million hits without any formal, 6 million views, without any formal promotion of it, just taken off, is the remarkable nature of the social media that we live in now. So I'll claim that the Texas Freedom Network has the ability to, dare I say it, change the world. Because because the way Texas goes is the way so many states go. When Texas adopts a textbook that has scientifically accurate information in it, so many other states are going to adopt it. So I predict that we are at the cusp, we are at a turning point. Pretty soon, science is going to be cool. It's going to be the thing people are going to want to be involved in. And the Texas Freedom Network is a big part of that. And I'm really honored to be here. I will say, though, although I embrace the idea, oh yeah, there I circled it. Thank you, Bill, yes. Although I embrace the idea, there's a chance that this will alienate people. I know. You bring it out selectively. Thank you, Madam President. Are you Madam President, Madam Executive Director?
I'm Kathy.
Kathy. Yeah. Well, keep up the good work, and can I have a stack of these? Yeah. It kind of crystallizes one's thoughts, but we have to get people excited about the passion, beauty, and joy of science. And what I always say when it comes down to any claim, I worked for a long time at Boeing, and I still have tremendous loyalty to Boeing and the very high vertical tails that our Boeing airplanes have. If you have never noticed, they have very good vertical tails, bigger than other companies. And so a local hero in Seattle for a long time was a guy named Tex Johnston. He was the test pilot on the 707 before the 700 series had been created. The 717 became military planes, 727, 37. It was just called the Dash 80. And there's the thing about this picture, this is one of the early flights, and this was flying over the city of Seattle showing off the plane. And just for you critical thinking skill buffs, this picture's upside down. Actually, the picture's like that. So I don't know how many jetliners you've flown on, but they seldom do a roll, a barrel roll with the airplane. But Tex Johnson did. And yes, and so this was the person who took this picture was called the flight engineer back when the instrumentation was not, everybody wasn't confident, so they had three people, a pilot, co-pilot, and an engineer who sat sideways. And he, I guess, unbuckled his seatbelt and, got her done. Because when you, what you want to do if you ever do this with an airplane is you want to do what they call ballistic roll, where you go fast enough that you don't spill the coffee. You maintain positive G's. And yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I know. And Tex Johnson affected that down holler, Chuck Yeager, World War II veteran, I'm just going to roll this old plane, and I know it, and he did. And so he landed, and there was a press conference, and Boeing management expressed concern. Expressed concern that I think there wasn't video in those days. Things weren't recorded, but I heard stories that there was anger. And they said, what are you, I paraphrase, what are you doing? He said, I'm selling airplanes. And then he said, one test is worth 1,000 expert opinions. And thank you. I didn't thank you. Those are words to live by. They really are, especially when it comes. Watch out. When I'm an engineer, a mechanical engineer. I mean, I'm human, but I'm a mechanic. Just watch out when one of us says, "Well, it should work." Yeah. It should be okay. Yeah. But along that line, when you look at the periodic table, this is one of the most remarkable ideas humans have ever come up with. You understand, Mendeleev, the guy who really did the work on this, predicted that elements would be discovered, and he predicted their melting points. That's not easy. That's not straightforward. But once you have it, once you've figured it out, then you can have metal alloys and frisbees and ballpoint pens and extraordinary systems that allow us to feed 7.2 billion people where we used to be able to feed fewer than 1 billion, because we've understood these materials and how they interact, and chemicals and chemistry. And just think what lies ahead, what materials are yet to be discovered. Oh, by the way, this is my own interpretation of the periodic table. All of the atomic weights are just the 2 digits. You're not going to find carbon with 8 significant digits up there. And I put hydrogen off on its own because if you talk to a normal person, like a chemist, hydrogen donates a proton and it's an acid and it's all cool, right? But if you talk to a crazy person, like an astrophysicist, hydrogen acts like a metal and is metallic. Yeah, dude, really, apparently, under the right circumstances. But what always gets me is most of the universe that we can observe is either hydrogen or helium. And we're talking about percentages that are really hard to imagine. 97%, less than 3%. Then you and I, everything that we're made of, virtually everything in this room, if I'm allowed to discount the hydrogen that's in the water, everything else is what we're made of. And I just call that everything else here. And it's astonishing. That to me is just astonishing. I mean, you're talking about phosphorus and sulfur and carbon and oxygen and nitrogen and all our happy friends, our borons and our beryllium copper. Does anybody have a Cross ballpoint pen? They say the spring is beryllium copper, high end all the way. Stainless steel. All this stuff came, nickels, dimes, silver, gold, all this stuff came into existence when stars exploded, if I may, billions of years ago. And that, for me, is troubling because it means I missed the whole beginning of the movie. But it's also just fills me with reverence that we humans are humble species, really, in so many ways. I don't want to shock anybody, but we kind of suck, in a lot of ways. But yet we are able to figure this out. We are able to infer how we all got here, or at least how a lot of the material we're made of came to be. And we are somehow part of the universe. We are somehow connected to all this. And that just fills me with joy and reverence and humility. And I wonder, I guess we all do, what am I doing here? And the thing that I just want to remind people, literally, if it comes up, is strontium and rubidium. This is really the one. The half-life of rubidium and strontium, this transaction, is almost 50 billion years. You can do it in an oven when it's hot. You can do it when it's cold. You can do it in a vacuum. You can do it under high pressure. But this interaction with the beta particles and the protons and the neutrinos is going on at this steady, steady rate. And that is how people inferred the age of the Earth, because no matter what happens, no matter what you want to believe in, no matter what torch you want to carry, the thing that comes up with me personally all the time is the Earth is not 10,000 years old. It's not, just can't be. If you're going to assert that you got a deity that, along with the fossil dinosaur bones and the deposition rates of sediments at the end of, pick one, the Nile, the Mississippi River, along with that this deity also snuck in 48.8 billion year half-life. Ha ha ha! Just to test you. You're stretching my credibility, man. I'm sorry. I cannot stick with you at that point. I got to let you go. I mean, we laugh, but I think if people really just took, if I may, 48.8 billion years to watch this, you would let go of this idea that this document, translated many, many times over centuries into English in stilted grammar, is somehow more authoritarian than everything you can observe in nature. So along that line, I just want to point out, I very, very much appreciate receiving this award, but I go way back with this. I was talking about climate change in 1993, that book. To the young people, it sounds astonishing, but there were people alive in 1993. And they, back then, look at the guy in the lower right, he's like half my age. The people back then did not have the internet. I know, they're looking at me. What did you guys do all day? Yeah, well. And then the other thing I point out to people, if you look at the Earth from space, this is the International Space Station. Actually, it's a picture of the International Space Station. It really wouldn't fit in this room, so let it go. But if you showed this to my grandfather, he would think that, first of all, he'd think it wasn't real, he'd think it was a painting. If you showed it to him later in life, my father's a kid, he would think that it was a picture, but it was out of focus. But it's not out of focus. That's the atmosphere. That's it. And so if you had an extraordinary car, and you could, on an extraordinary road, and you could drive straight up for an hour and a half. Of course, the way people drive in Texas would be about 20 minutes. I love it, I must say. You'd be in outer space, just in an hour at freeway speeds. And it is this idea that I think is really lost on a lot of people, that the atmosphere is that thin. So everything each and every one of us does affects everyone in the whole world, because we all share the air. There's nothing you do that doesn't affect the atmosphere and doesn't affect people everywhere. This is a remarkable insight, and it's something I hope to promote in the coming years as this issue becomes more and more important, and I hope we reach this big turning point. I am I'm very happy to be speaking here. One time I spoke at TED. Do you know TED, the Technology Entertainment Design Conference? And I made a remark. Well, we at the Planetary Society work to keep the Earth from getting hit by an asteroid. And everybody laughed. Ha, 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 ha. Ha, ha, ha. The Earth getting hit with an asteroid. That's ridiculous. Ha, ha, ha. So when I was in astronomy class, Professor Sagan insisted that we study the Tunguska event, which is where there was an air burst over Siberia. Do you know this story where you jump off, pick one, the Golden Gate Bridge, you jump off the Golden Gate Bridge, and you hit the water going so fast that it's like concrete and it kills you instantly? That's probably true. I don't want to try it. But if you're an asteroid going at, say, 20 kilometers a second, and you hit the Earth's atmosphere, the atmosphere acts like concrete, and you just disintegrate. Boom. And so this was when I was in school, Tunguska, but Chelyabinsk was just less than a year ago in February. Russia got hit with an airburst. And, oh, by the way, if you're an asteroid or a meteorite and you're coming into the Earth's atmosphere from the north, you're probably going to hit Russia. You might hit Canada, but you have more than a 50-50 chance of hitting Russia if you're coming from the north. And so it exploded, and everybody went, wow, that's cool, and the insurance fraud is so high there that everybody has a camera on their dashboard. And that's the deal. And so there were all these dashboard camera pictures of this thing exploding, and then 3 minutes went by, and the sonic booms hit, and windows were blown out, and 1,000 people ended up having to go to emergency rooms for sutures, for mostly glass cuts. And this is something that could happen again. But it won't happen again. I mean, we won't do anything about it unless we believe it's possible. My second grade teacher, Mrs. McGonigal, read to us from a very authoritative book, a big book, about the demise of the ancient dinosaurs. And the claim in the book was that the ancient dinosaurs were living with mammals. The mammals got really good at things, and they took all of the dinosaur food. And so the ancient dinosaurs died out. Okay, look, I'm a Tyrannosaurus. You're a rabbit. We're done. And even she knew that was lame. Come on, that was nothing. So in my lifetime, people discovered the crater off Chicxulub, Mexico. That was almost certainly the result of an impactor, an asteroid of some sort, or a collection of asteroids. They hit the Earth so hard. How hard did they hit the Earth? They threw dust halfway to the moon. Halfway to the moon, and the diameter of the ejected material was bigger than the diameter of the Earth. So the Earth was surrounded, with a little gravity, the Earth was surrounded by red-hot rocks for a few days or weeks. And it set the world on fire. And the ancient dinosaurs apparently had difficulty dealing with this. And they were largely obliterated, and only the organisms that could live in caves and deep in the sea got through cleanly. There's no evidence that the ancient dinosaurs had a space program. But we do. Now, one of the great questions that people ask, this is called Fermi's paradox, if the likelihood of life is, even if it's an extraordinarily small fraction, there are so many billions of stars, and now it's become clear in my lifetime that almost every star has planets. So there's so many billions of planets, and that's in our galaxy. Then there's billions of galaxies. You got to figure that there's somebody else out there asking the same questions. Is there a place with a blue sky instead of a pink one? Wow. I wonder if they have a Texas Freedom now. I wonder what goes on out there. And the question is, why haven't we heard from these civilizations? Well, it's very reasonable that you have to pass the asteroid test. You have to have a moon and two superpowers that show up, building, at first, weapons to launch stuff at each other above their atmosphere. And then they figure, well, I'll tell you what, I'll race you to the moon. Cool. Whoever gets there first wins something. And so you end up with a space program so that when an asteroid is detected with your name on it, you could go do something about it. It could be that if you are a civilization like the ancient dinosaurs who didn't have this great happy happenstance of Cold War motivations to produce a space program, you wouldn't be able to deflect an asteroid. So we are the first generation that could. And if we don't, it will be a tragedy. And somebody said, this is 2 or 3 nights ago, I was in Toronto, and somebody said, well, it's fine for you and your asteroid deflection schemes, Bill, but what about clean water, raise the standard of living of girls and women to reduce the world's population in an organized way? What about vaccinations? I go, look, if the Earth gets hit with an asteroid, that stuff's very important. But if the Earth gets hit with an asteroid, that's it, okay? For you Apple computer users, it's called wipe of the hard drive. For the PC people, is it still Control Alt Delete? Is that what it is? Everything goes away. So now at the Planetary Society, we work to fight this. I was on The View earlier this week. No, I was. It was cool, and Whoopi Goldberg's really into this. So we did a classic demonstration about how you would go about deflecting an asteroid in a gravity field. It was big fun. But denying it or running in circles screaming is probably not going to do it. And so we need to raise awareness about this. And I'm not kidding. Well, you can guess which one it was on the show. Said, well, I pray about it. I'm open-minded, but if I had a choice between rocket science and prayer, I'll do both. We'll do both. But let's keep the rocket science in. All right. So I tell you, I think we're at a turning point. The most popular show on television, not the most popular sitcom, the most popular show is The Big Bang Theory. And if you told me 5 years ago that this show with these characters was going to be the most popular show on television, for those of you who don't know, I had a scene with Bob Newhart. The guy is so funny. I can't tell you. Oh, did anybody see the episode? Oh, man. Hi, Professor Jeffries. You probably don't remember me due to your... no, I remember you. This thing... And my girlfriend says that, I'm sorry, you have a girlfriend? And then she says, we're wearing the same kind of orthopedic shoes. I dress like a celebrity. And then he says, oh, now I see, this is your girlfriend. Good. If you haven't seen the episode, sorry, it was a digression. But it was really exciting to be included in the show and to have this is where I'm trying to be more deadpan than Bob Newhart, which you can't really do that. But I did my best, and it was very well received. And it's at this point now where, along with that video from Big Think, where people are expecting me to not just be a kid show host. And I just want to point out that I know there's a lot of educators in here, and we could say, let's give a round of applause for educators. But no kidding, you spend more time with your teacher than you do with your parents during most of the school year. You spend more time with your teachers than you do with your siblings. You spend more time learning science from them than you will anywhere else in your life. And so to be part of that is really an honor. But along with that, I admit, I've been pushing, and so for those of you who don't, there may be a few of you here who don't read American Society of Mechanical Engineers magazine. But I just want to point out that my letter got published. If there's any control theory people in here, it's about pseudo-derivative feedback, and it's better, and it gives me some street cred. So for those of you who wonder why the room is too hot and too cold, and why the cruise control in the car keeps or occasionally hunts to find its final speed that you've set, it's because they're proportional integral derivative controllers instead of pseudo-derivative feedback. Okay, I'm moving on. Thank you very much for listening to that. So I took this job at the Planetary Society because, well, nominally, we want to, dare I say it, change the world. But there are two questions that trouble all of us. And if you meet somebody who says he or she has not asked these two questions, they're lying. And the first one is, where did we come from? How did we get here? And I think this is where a lot of the conflict comes, especially in the state of Texas in these recent things, is people are looking deep within us. People are trying to find out how we all got here. How did we got here? And this is where what my Professor Sagan would call these creation myths, these stories about how we came to be. And cultures all over the world have them. But now, through the process of science, we have one that, at least for me, is much more reasonable than let's say, the Earth is 10,000 years old. Then the other question that gets everybody is, are we alone? Are we alone in the world, in the universe, in the cosmos? I mean, if you haven't looked up at the sky at night and just wondered if there isn't somebody out there looking back at you, I don't believe you. I don't believe you. It's like somebody says, well, I don't like hot chocolate. Of course you do. Come on. Of course you do. And so everybody is asked these two questions. And I think that by using these questions, we can address in a rational way what I will call, for, if I understand the usage in this room, the other side. That we can, you have your ideas about where we all came from and whether or not we are alone, and we have our ideas. We have rubidium and strontium. We have layers of rock. We have the Permian Basin. I used to work with guys in the oil field who thought that the fossil shells, seashells, which are just all over the ground there, were a result of the Great Flood. And I pointed out that just didn't seem that reasonable. But yet, we share this idea of trying to find out where we all came from and whether or not we are alone. With the space program, we have gotten these extraordinary views of what I like to call our place in space, our place in the cosmos. This was taken by the Cassini spacecraft, which is out at this time, was out beyond the orbit of Saturn, pointed back toward the sun. And the spacecraft is still going, has a plutonium battery, it's still working fine, costs about $3 billion. If anybody's out there, I warn you, it's not even locked. I mean, somebody could just go up to it. But engineers got this thing pointed back toward the sun. So the Saturnian rings are lit from below. If you talk to a lot of people and you say, what's your favorite planet? A lot of people will say Pluto, but a lot of people will say Saturn. But for me, I'll be honest, it's Earth. I mean, for me, it's where I'm from, all my friends are here. But Saturn is a beautiful place. But I just want to point out, this is an extraordinary picture. Because not only is it a picture of Saturn, it's a picture of the Earth. The Earth is right there. Now, if we can go just, and this is in rocket science terms, just 100,000 kilometers up there, if we could go around the world 3 times, there's the same planet against the background stars, enhanced. That's it. Everybody you've ever met, every mesquite charcoal briquette, all the bugs, and there's no shortage. I used to work in as I say, in Refugio in Victoria. There's no shortage of bugs. All the sea jellies, the squid, blue whales, the bacteria, viruses, everybody, everything you've ever met has conducted his entire existence on that little speck. And that just fills me with reverence. That fills me with astonishment. That fills me with, what am I doing here? When I was a kid, I grew up in the city of Washington, and when you live there, to go on vacation, you go straight east, or as east as possible, to Delaware, the state of Delaware. And I was standing on the beach there. It's the same terrain, you know, Hurricane Sandy and those beaches in New Jersey. It's the same deal. And I was a kid, and I had been told by our third grade teacher, Mrs. Cochran, this is after Ms. McGonigal, that there are more stars in the sky than grains of sand on the beach. And I remember thinking, that's extraordinary. And I mean, I wouldn't have expressed it this way at that time. But I guess my feeling was, Mrs. Cochran, are you high? Have you ever been to a beach? Mrs. Cochran, there's a lot of sand, okay? That way and that way, 1,500 nautical miles of sand. And you look behind you and there's more sand. You shuffle your feet and there's sand, and the tide goes out even a little bit and there's more sand. You swim out in the ocean just a few body lengths, and it's a big exciting thing as a kid, go down and pick up a handful of sand. You're telling me there's more sand than all of that, more stars than all of that sand. That is crazy. I mean, how apparently it's true. So I started to feel insignificant at this time. I looked at the sand. I imagined myself when the sun was going down and my shadow was getting longer and longer and longer. I wondered if you could see my shadow out there at Rigel 12 or some planet around another star. And then I realized you probably couldn't. It's too small. It's insignificant. I mean, I am just like a grain of sand. You can't see the shadows of sand. You can't see the shadow of me. I'm just a speck standing here with all these other specks. On the Earth, which is a speck that orbits the sun, completely unremarkable star. I'm a speck with a bunch of specks, part of a speck, orbiting a speck with a bunch of other specks in a galaxy full of specks in the middle of specklessness. I suck. But then with my brain, which is only this big, and this guy used to work in the oil field, his brain was, but with your brain, you can imagine all of that. With your brain, you can know your place in space. With your brain, you can know and appreciate that we are made of the stuff of stars and that we have a responsibility to each other to treat ourselves with respect, because this is it. This is all we get, is this planet. And that, my friends, is the joy of discovery. That's the passion, beauty, and joy that comes to us through the process of science. And with you, I claim we're at a turning point and we can change the world. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for this. Oh, wow. Oh, thank you, guys. Oh, thank you. Oh, wow. I love you, man.
So much.
Thank you.
Great.
Wow. Thank you.
Bill Nye, the Science Guy.